Hey everyone, good morning. I am Jessie Whittish with Kentucky Youth Advocates. It is great to see you for this week's Advocate Virtual Forum. Just a reminder that we are recording today's forum to be shared as both a video and as a podcast. So because of that, we ask that you stay muted, but if you have questions or comments, please do drop those into the chat, and our panelists, will try and answer those, and if we don't get an answer, we can follow up with you later to get you the info you need, because we know that we're going to be sharing a lot of information today and some specifics. So with that, I am going to turn this over to Dr. Terry Brooks. Oh, let's see, you're still muted, Terry. I'm going to unmute you.
Okay, we good? Okay, sorry about that. So we want to welcome everybody. As always, we open by saying, if you're one of our regulars, welcome, welcome, welcome. And if you are brand new, welcome, welcome, welcome. So, you know, I don't know about you, but we look at so many issues that challenge kids. All are important, but sometimes something just hits you in the brain or in the heart. And during the pandemic and now post-pandemic, this issue of food insecurity has a special pull on me. I think it's because, and our experts on the panel today will tell me that it's because I was uninformed, which is probably accurate, but like I just am blown away by how naive I was about the issue of food insecurity. That today, in 2021, we have so many little boys and little girls who are worried, who are scared about whether they're going to eat tomorrow. And so I just so appreciate both the experts who are joining us and all of you all, because when I look at this issue, it is absolutely pregnant with opportunities. We know that local grassroots on the ground groups play such a significant role in addressing this issue. We also know that the institutions, whether they're schools or faith communities or nonprofits, are critical. We also know that there are important efforts in Frankfurt, and there are important budget and policy opportunities in Washington, which are sitting right there for us to grab. So whether you're a policy wonk that is ready to work the congressional delegation, or whether you're somebody in a grassroots nonprofit looking for ways to feed the boys and girls you serve, today we have the right people on the call. Alicia, take it away.
But thank you for framing that up a little bit for us today. And I think that we do have a great panel with us today, some experts on nutrition, feeding policies at the state level, local, and also the federal level to talk about this issue. So we have Karena Cash from Feeding Kentucky. She's an advocacy coordinator with us today. We also have Leigh Dixon, who is with the Kentucky Department for Community-Based Services. She's a community support advisor. And then we also have Michael Halligan, who is the CEO of God's Pantry Food Bank that serves Lexington and Eastern Kentucky. And then he also serves as the chair of Feeding America's Federal Policy Advisory Board. So very excited to have all of you with us today to talk about this important issue. So I'm just going to dive right in and ask a couple of questions kind of about where we are currently in Kentucky with food security and food access. So really just what's the current situation in terms of food access? what supports are out there right now for our Kentucky kids and families, and then if you're seeing any gaps, where are those gaps in access? So I'll let Leanne start us out with kind of what we're seeing right now.
Right now, we have a lot of initiatives going on with SNAP for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program that adds, that is increasing the amount that each family receives and also increasing their food buying dollars. Right now, since the beginning of COVID, participation with SNAP has went up about 60,000 households. But the benefits that we're issuing are more than double what we issued pre-COVID. And that has a lot to do with the emergency allotments, which bring a family from what they might normally qualify, maybe $100 to the maximum amount for their family size, which would be maybe $450. So that has given people more disposable food money to buy the things that many go without. We also have we were approved to offer an additional 15% increase over the maximum allotment for a household. So all of our families are receiving, especially people with children who had income before and may not have been eligible for much, are getting a lot more now, or getting much more than they're used to getting. And they're being smart about it. From the majority that I've heard from are either saving back, not spending like it's never going to end, or freezing things and putting things up, buying in bulk. We're seeing more use at Sam's Club and Costco, more purchases. So, and fraud has not noticeably increased due to this. We also just operated DSNAP. We have a lot going on. So we operated ZSNAP in 31 counties in mainly Eastern Kentucky through the Southeast. Those were counties that were affected by flooding. And that was back in March and April of this year, but we cannot ask for disaster SNAP until a federal declaration of disaster is declared in those areas. But that program helps us to offer benefits to individuals who are affected in those areas by the disaster who don't normally qualify for SNAP. So that has put, and that is the maximum allotment for the household size, plus the 15%. We give the card when the person applies and it's ready to use the next morning. So it has helped several people. I don't have the exact numbers at this time, how much we did do, but because we just finished up a project yesterday. But I went through Eastern Kentucky to pick up our cards, our remaining cards, and heard a lot of really good things from people. We've also offered, increased our retailers for SNAP EBT purchasing so that they can online. So you can order and this has helped a lot of people with small children that don't have time to shop or, take the children out, and especially due to health concerns. Some of our elderly folks, you can order online and have it delivered to your home or pick it up at the store. That's been a big helpful thing. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, because this is Jason's major initiative, the drug felony disqual has been removed effective 7/1. So a lot of individuals who had drug felonies in the past will now be able to have access to SNAP benefits and without the hurdles and the extra steps of being approved. We're really excited about that. That was many, many years in the making.
Yeah, that is a very exciting
Information.
Michael, could you share a little bit about what's going on from the food bank perspective around the state right now, and what kind of access we're seeing for families?
Yeah, so what we've seen across the Commonwealth of Kentucky since the pandemic broke is roughly a 20% increase in need. What's been very interesting is the way individuals who are experiencing hunger are accessing food varies over the course of that 16-month, depending on what kinds of programs are available. Let me use God's Pantry Food Bank as the example. Immediately after the pandemic broke in Fayette County, we went from averaging about 530 households a week to almost 1,300 who were accessing food through the emergency food assistance programs offered by the food bank. Over the past 16 months, that average has been about 630 households a week, or roughly a 20% increase. However, in the last 8 weeks, it's only been between 350 and 400 households. The reason? Increase in SNAP benefits through the waivers that are available. Right now, SNAP benefits are maximized, and the stimulus checks that were issued about 2 months ago. That's a nice problem to have from a food banking perspective. We would much rather see people shop for groceries at a grocery store than have to stand in a line at a food pantry or some kind of a soup kitchen or on-site feeding place. As was just mentioned, most of those waivers expire at the end of September. So we fully expect to see an increase in needs through the emergency food assistance process come the fall. And a lot of what's going on right now with child nutrition reauthorization, we'll talk more about that in a minute, and the upcoming farm bill about 1.5 years from now will be how do we take waivers and other programs that have been in place during this pandemic, during this disaster, and get them into legislative code so they are permanently available to those who are experiencing hunger, not just during a pandemic.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we'll definitely be talking more about those federal packages here in just a few minutes. Karena, I wanted to hear from you as well. I know that there's been a lot of focus on what was going on during the school year to feed children across the state, but interested to hear from you about what's going on with the summer feeding programs this year.
Yeah, so what's kind of interesting about summer feeding, so whenever the pandemic started, the federal government, the USDA, put these waivers in place that allowed the summer food service program to operate. And so in a lot of districts across Kentucky, the summer food service program has been operating for 16 months, far beyond the summer. But with a couple key changes, and probably the biggest and most impactful change that we've seen is the waiving of the congregate feeding requirement. So in normal years, summer meals have to be served on site, kids have to consume it on site, and the idea is that kids will be getting additional enrichment activities. They'll be doing reading classes and getting to socialize with other kids. However, during a pandemic, that congregate feeding doesn't work. And even during normal times, if you live in a rural area, that congregate feeding doesn't work. So with the waiving of the congregate feeding, we've seen a lot of really innovative ways that school nutrition directors have been feeding kids. We've seen a large use of mobile meals. We've seen buses being used to deliver meals directly to kids' houses. And we've just seen real increases in participation in that summer food service program. And also in the chat, I'll put in a link to something you can text to identify summer meals in your neighborhood and where those resources are at. But overall, the summer food service program, I think we've seen a real increase in utilization of that program because of some of the waivers that have been in place throughout the pandemic.
Great, yeah, thanks for sharing that. And it sounds like that might be another opportunity, like Michael was saying, to make some of those waivers permanent in the future so that we don't have to continue to have these short-term programs. So I'd like to shift just a little bit and talk, Michael, what you brought up really about the federal pieces and what's going on there. So I know there's been a lot of movement around nutrition programs and access at the federal level. You mentioned the CNR, which is the Child Nutrition Reauthorization. So if you can maybe just start with a quick explainer of what that is for those on the call who maybe aren't as familiar with that, and then maybe talk a little bit about what you're seeing right now and what you're excited about at the federal level.
Yeah, so I hope I can actually do justice to child nutrition authorization quickly because it's pretty complicated. What I thought I might do is give you a little bit of a baseline. So child nutrition reauthorization is a process. It's a congressional process. It's not a bill. The way child nutrition reauthorization works is every 4 to 5 years, Congress reviews the child nutrition programs and reauthorizes those programs for another 4 to 5 years. The last time child nutrition reauthorization was actually done was in 2010, so over a decade ago, and it was under the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010. And there's 2 main provisions in that act that became law. The first is that categorical eligibility was brought into all of the child nutrition programs and has been a staple of eligibility ever since. And the second thing that happened was that for WIC, the program was modified to eliminate vouchers and go to EBT cards for WIC. Those were the two large changes a decade ago on child nutrition. One of the things that folks often ask me is, what programs does the child nutrition policy actually cover? And there are several, so bear with me for a minute. The National School Lunch Program, which was enacted in 1946, is part of child nutrition reauthorization. The School Breakfast Program, which was in 1966. The Child Care and Food Program, or Child and Adult Care Food Program, that's often referred to as after-school feeding. That was in 68. The Summer Food Service Program was also in 68. The Special Milk Program was in 54. That program has gone through a variety of different iterations over the years. The Supplemental Food Program for Women, Infant, and Children, WIC, was in 1974. The WIC Farmers Market Edition was in 92. And the most recent was the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program. That was in 2002. So child nutrition reauthorization is 8 different programs that all have different histories. There's one other thing that's really important to remember about these programs. Some of them are authorized and appropriated in child nutrition authorization. Some are just authorized, and they have to go through annual appropriations. So the way to think about that is the National School Lunch Program, the Breakfast Program, the After School Program, and the Milk Program. Those are all authorized, but they're also appropriated as part of child nutrition reauthorization. On the other hand, WIC, the Summer Food Service Program, and the WIC Farmers Market Program, those are authorized under child nutrition reauthorization, but they are not appropriated. They are subject to appropriation every year, and it's been that way since 2015. So that's just a quick overview of what CNR is and the programs that are covered. Key opportunities for this current cycle. One, Karena just talked about this a minute ago, is to relax some of the congregate feeding rules. Developmentally, congregating has a huge impact on child development. So we don't want to see congregate feeding eliminated, but in rural communities in particular, oftentimes congregate feeding hinders the ability for a child to get food, particularly in the summertime, because there's not school buses, there's no way for them to get to a common congregate site. So having some flexibility under congregate feeding will help kids, particularly in rural areas across the country, have access to food. Taking the summer EBT and the pandemic EBT and making that a permanent part of policy is really important. There have been demonstration tests done for 10 years. Right now, about 15% of children who access National School Lunch Program take advantage of the summer feeding program, only 15%. The demonstration tests on EBT have shown that those numbers double and triple. So making that a permanent part of policy rather than a waiver is a critically important part of this current child nutrition reauthorization. Simplifying the differences between the CACFP, Child and Adult Program, and the Summer Feeding Program. Right now, those programs have 2 different standards, 2 different reimbursement rates, 2 different educational processes that sponsors have to go through. Making it all one program and simplifying all of that is hugely important. And then modifying the categorical eligibility. Today for child nutrition, it's 50% then become categorical eligible. Most programs at the federal level are at 40%. So simplifying that code so that it's all based on 40% eligibility versus 50 will make it easier for people to remember what programs they're eligible for, what ones they're not. I don't know if that was simple. It's a complicated process that the federal government goes through every 4 to 5 years. This year, there is a lot of momentum on Capitol Hill to do something, and the things that I just talked about are the things that seem to be the most prevalent in the minds of our congressional leaders and seem to be the things that everybody is coalescing around getting something done with. And Alicia, I'm happy to ask some more questions on any of that as we go through the rest of today's forum.
Yeah, certainly. I appreciate you kind of going over that. I think that we've also seen we might be able to share sort of a follow-up document that's an explainer of the kind of what you just went over as well, which I think could be helpful for some of our advocates on the call to kind of summarize that as well. And we'll be sharing that in the follow-up information.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point. Let me throw 2 things out real quick. So if you're interested in looking at some of this on the Feeding America website, you can go to feedingamerica.org, take action/advocate. And I'll put a link in the chat box on that. And there's also some wonderful information on the Congressional Resource Service that really summarizes, in fact, that's what I was just reading from, really summarizes what CNR is and what all of the child nutrition policies that are supported by the program. It's a great resource, and it gives you a lot of wonderful history and helps folks understand where they can focus energy if they are so inclined.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And we'll be sure to send some of that in the follow-up for our advocates on the call today as well. Karena, do you have anything to add about what you guys are seeing and excited about at the federal level at Feeding Kentucky?
Yeah, I can share a couple of pieces. One thing that Mike didn't mention is there are some WIC priorities. So like he did mention, WIC is part of CNR, and I think there's a lot of opportunities to modernize WIC. So in Kentucky, we do have WIC on the EBT card. However, not all of the WIC programs on the EBT card. For example, the farmer's market voucher is still a paper voucher that you take to the farmer's market, and not every county in Kentucky currently participates in that program. We would love to see that expanded. Also, something that Leanne mentioned is that SNAP, we have online processing now. It's where you can order your groceries and have them delivered to you or pick them up. Or WIC doesn't have that. WIC does not have that capacity. So programs or any type of funding or structures that could modernize WIC to allow for the online processing. Because if you have, a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, you probably don't want to spend 30 minutes to an hour going through a grocery store, trying to get them together. So looking at WIC, those are really our 2 big priorities and opportunities to modernize that program and make that program a lot easier for families to use. One thing that we're really, really excited about is kind of that summer EBT and congregate feeding rule. There's a lot of momentum around keeping that congregate feeding requirement waived and also making a permanent summer EBT program. There's several bills in Congress right now that would do both of those. And the bills vary a lot in terms of what the summer EBT amount would be. So in one of the bills, I believe it's $100 a month, and another it's $60. There's also a bill that Senator McConnell has signed on to called the Hunger-Free Summers for Kids Act that would provide $30 a month to kids through the summer EBT program. Sorry, give me 1 second. And that's really what we're excited about. We're really, really excited to see that Senator McConnell has signed on and kind of taken charge of summer EBT and congregate feeding and this child nutrition process. We're really excited about the prospect of a Hunger-Free Summers for Kids Act, and we're really, really hopeful that child nutrition reauthorization will pass, and it'll pass soon, especially because, like Mike said, a lot of these waivers expire in September. So if we don't pass child nutrition reauthorization this year, we'll have sponsors who have been operating with that waived congregate feeding requirement, operating with that waived area eligibility, and then they'll have to go back to the way they were doing it before. And then whenever we finally passed CNR, they'll go back to the congregate feeding being waived. And so it's just a lot of confusion for sponsors. So we're really hopeful that it will be passed soon.
Yeah, thank you for adding that in. And Leanne, I just wanted to give you an opportunity. If you have anything to add about federal policy, I know you're at the state level, but wanted to make sure you weren't left out if you had anything to add there.
I can give an update on PEBT, all the PEBT if you're ready now, or we can wait a little bit.
Yeah, I think it would be great if you want to give like kind of where we've been with PEBT as a little refresher for those on the call. I know it's been a lot this year, and some of it has been
a lot
to take in, and then also maybe what you anticipate is coming next.
Well, in the beginning of March 2020, nobody even knew about PEBT, and then COVID happened, and PEBT came about because of COVID. We started working and wrote a plan to get PEBT approved for school children who receive free or reduced price meals at their school, and that could be through a community eligible program school where all the children eat for free, or through the household's individual application for benefits. We were authorized to issue March, April, and May benefits, which were an average of the school days remaining in the school year at that time. And then right before federal fiscal year ended, we were allowed or given the opportunity to apply for August and September benefits, but they all had to be out the door by September 30th for the end of the federal fiscal year, which was a huge lift. And we issued PEBT to about 650,000 students during August and September. Then we applied for additional PEBT, which is known as PEBT round 3 around here. So that was from October 2020 through the end of this previous school year, May 2021. And that benefit was based on a child's learning mode at their school. So if the school was totally virtual and no one was in person, the child received 20 days at the national reimbursement rate for National School Lunch Program. If the child was on a hybrid schedule, a couple of days in, a couple of days out, they received 12 days. If the child was totally in person, they were not eligible for the benefit. And that was a lot of education we had to give around that. So most people, though, we had a reconsideration process because the benefit for each individual child was based on a predominant learning mode of each district, and which might not obviously be the learning mode that a particular child was participating in. So we have a reconsideration process where the parents can call, we verify it with the school for them, and then issue any back benefits to that child. That has worked out exceptionally well. We learned a lot from the first couple of rounds when we did not have enough phone support. Well, we had no phone support. We had, just an email box with 4 people responding to 8,000 emails a day, and it was a lot. So we learned a lot from the first rounds. We're back. I think the third round has went remarkably well. And we're ready for childcare PEBT. That's what we call it. It's for our kids 0 to 5 years old, up to age 6. So they can be 5 and 364 days. In the month that they turn 6, they will receive that month. And then after that, they're no longer eligible for this particular form of PEBT. It's for children who were not enrolled in school and did not receive PEBT through the school children programs, the first 3. We are backdating to October 2020. So all of our child care benefits, we have got a plan approved. Those benefits are going to start going out to people on their SNAP EBT cards, because these are SNAP households that are eligible, beginning the end of July. We're probably issue every 2 weeks. We're still working on the schedule, but it should be every 2 weeks, 2 months at a time, so that we can get them out there faster. People have been waiting a long time. We'd like to get it out much faster than we were able to in some of the previous rounds. Those benefits will be based on the hybrid or virtual schedule of the predominant learning mode of the district that's in that area. I will tell you, we decided that. So in the 120 counties, when we looked at a district, we looked at the most generous district we could. So if I had a district in one county that was all virtual, we're giving all the childcare kids 20 days. If we had some districts that were open and some were hybrid, we're giving it the most generous amount we can give for those kids. Then just really quickly, we just received comments back on our summer PEBT plan. That's for our school children and childcare children. So the 0 to 5 group will continue to receive benefits through the summer. That's June, July, and August. And then our school children will also receive summer PBT. It's a flat rate of $375 per child. And we will probably split that in 2 or 3 issuances just to make it a little easier and to not overwhelm our supply chains. That's something we have to be very cognizant of because of all the benefits we're putting out right now. And we always give our grocers a heads up just so that they can plan accordingly. That one we expect will probably begin issuing at about the same time as childcare, roughly 2 weeks later, but they will overlap because we don't want anyone waiting until October or November to receive a benefit they should have gotten in June. So,
right.
I think
Yeah, thank you for going through that. I think that's helpful. I do want to ask if you could maybe just give a refresher for those who aren't aware or familiar with why we're able to do the summer EBT right now, even though they were just talking about that needs to be something that's in the CNR. So this is just a temporary one-time.
Yes, and it's through the pandemic EBT. So it's the PEBT actually. And that again is only for school children, and it was authorized through the act that allows us to operate PEBT and then extended PEBT benefits through this next school year. And we do have funding. Well, we have a promise of some funding to go through the new coming school year, but we have not received any guidance to how that looks. So if children are all returning in person, and we're still not sure if that's going to happen, but we just don't know how it looks. If they use the same guidelines, if we're required to have children out of school so many days, I'm not sure that we'll have any eligible districts, but it's a possibility. But some PEBT is literally just these 3 months of 2021, and we don't know if we'll ever get it back. But I think it's fantastic, and we've been talking about doing a summer EBT for several years, and I'm just really glad. I think this is setting the framework for that program in the future.
And kind of just to build on that, a lot of what we're seeing in the Child Nutrition Reauthorization is programs that have been in place throughout the pandemic and waivers that have been in place throughout the pandemic and have been really, really successful at feeding kids, such as waiving that congregate meal requirement, allowing for mobile meals, pandemic EBT, and allowing families to get grocery cards. They've been really, really successful at feeding kids. And we've almost had this past 16 months as this trial run of what are these programs were permanent. And we've seen they're really successful, and we'd like to make them permanent.
And our cabinet has approached other cabinets with the idea of doing a summer EBT program in the past. And we were told it was too hard. It's a lot of work and we can't do that and we don't have the data. Well, we've proven to them that they can do it now. So hopefully that is, if it's not becomes permanent, maybe we can apply for the waiver in the future, because I think we can actually lift that pretty easily now.
Yeah, definitely. It's very exciting to hear that there's a lot of momentum around making some of these waivers permanent. And I'm sure that it would be great to have a permanent framework and structure in place and not have to keep redoing these plans every few months to get them reauthorized.
There are 2 of us literally that do manual spreadsheets, and yes.
Certainly, I'm sure that you're looking
at the same name and date of birth as another child in another district. It's surprising how many children have the same names and dates of birth.
I bet. We did have a question in the chat that I just wanted to ask. I think it's just for some clarity on, it says, well, is it for school kids who receive free lunch or just for those who have an active SNAP benefits case? So I think that's 2 different answers, right, for the summer versus the 0 to 5 population.
Well, 0 to 5 is definitely just SNAP children. Children that are active SNAP recipients in each given month. Summer PEBT is for those active 0 to 5 children, and also the school children who received free or reduced price meals while they were in school the previous year, regardless of their participation in virtual or hybrid or in-person learning in May. As long as they qualified for a free or reduced meal, they are eligible for summer. And just to mention, those community eligible schools, the CEP schools, they make up about 85% of our state. So there's a lot of students that would not otherwise be income eligible because of family income, but they go to a school where they receive those meals and they're PEBT eligible because of that.
Great. It sounds like that answered the question. So thank you for clarifying that.
Maybe one thing to build on that, however, so that's part of the reason why the notion of taking categorical eligibility from 50% to 40, that will increase eligibility for low income households with children or teens in school. And it will increase the opportunity to access that summer EBT card if it becomes part of permanent law for a wider swath of households that are otherwise eligible. So I don't know if that increases it from 85% of school districts to some greater number. I'm assuming it does. I don't have that data. But that's the reason why those two pieces of this current child nutrition reauthorization are so important, is because it increases the eligibility for folks to participate in the summer food service program and therefore be eligible for the summer EBT cards.
Great. And we just had, when did you say the funds were going to be released for summer months? It sounds like you're anticipating hopefully late July. Is that what you said, Leanne? But there's not an exact schedule yet?
Yes, we literally received comments on our plan yesterday just to confirm details, but I expect the approval to come this evening, and our developers are already building, but bureaucracy, they can't start something until we get an official approval. Just lots of red tape, but yeah, I expect the end of July, 1st of September for summer benefits to go out.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying that. And as soon as, you know, the information does become available from Leanne's office, KYA will also be sharing anything that we learn from them about dates and when things will be coming out and what the plans are. And I'm sure Feeding Kentucky also is going to be sharing that information. So be on the lookout for more specifics probably in the next month on all those programs. I think it's really a good time for us to now talk more about what do we need to be doing to make sure that all these things happen. So what can the advocates on this forum really be doing to help with all these efforts that you guys are talking about? So if you have any specific ideas for advocates, what they could be doing, who they can be advocating with, and then really if you could differentiate some of the mechanisms, because I think we've talked a lot about what are federal pieces and what are going to be more funding pieces and what are going to be state pieces. So kind of how would they advocate and where would they be able to put their efforts?
Yeah,
to start us out.
Looking at efforts right now, it looks like CNR. So they're doing a lot of the debate in the Senate right now. However, Senator McConnell is already on one of the CNR bills. And so I think there's a real opportunity here to start talking to your members of the House and the federal delegation of the House about what you want out of CNR and what you're seeing in your districts and in the kids in your community, and what would be helpful. I know Mike shared that resource from Feeding America that has some talking points and one pagers you can share. There's also some social media stuff in that resource that you can share. But really having those conversations with members of the House, because I think in the Senate, a lot of the debate is starting to wrap up. And like I said, Senator McConnell's on that. And so there's a real opportunity to start that education process in the House and really emphasize that, you know, there's a lot of momentum to make this happen. It needs to happen now, because if it doesn't happen, you know, kids will be getting these resources this summer and schools will be allowed to operate, you know, summer feeding in a certain way this summer. And then next summer, it'll all go back to the way it was before the pandemic, which is confusing for parents and families. It's confusing for sponsors. And it's just not an effective way to feed kids. We know only about 1 in 11 kids who qualify for free and reduced lunch or operating the summer food service route are accessing the summer food service program. And we really need to get to the point where we're providing a menu of options for kids to be fed during the summer. So really emphasizing that point and that it needs to happen this year.
One thing that I would add, Alicia, I think it's really important for advocates to share stories about individuals and households that are impacted by these programs and how administrative limits can dramatically affect folks who are food insecure, folks who are experiencing hunger. I had an opportunity to testify to the Senate Ag Committee a couple of years ago. And one of the stories that I shared during that testimony was about a summer food service site. It was a library, and they did an on-site feeding at the library. Then they loaded up the bookmobile with meals, and they went to a housing complex. And the children who received those meals, because of the congregate feeding requirement, had to consume those meals in observation of the sponsor. And there was one child who had a sibling who was not able to leave the apartment due to physical limitations. And what the library had to do is they had to create a special meal for that child. That meal was not reimbursable because they did not observe the child eating the meal. They gave it to the sibling, and the sibling took the meal into the apartment so the child could be fed that meal. So that's just a very simple example of how current law limits our ability to get nutrition to kids who are hungry, and simplifying some of those regulations through child nutrition reauthorization will make it easier for kids, particularly in the summer, to get more food. So it's so important to share stories, and I would encourage folks, if you're so inclined, reach out to congressional leaders, figure out who the staff person is for the district that you live in. Talk to the staff person in the 6th district. It's Claire Osborne, who works for Congressman Barr. And I can get you names for the other key people to reach out to and share the stories, because that's how people start to understand the impact of the laws and how we can make those laws easier for us to do the work we're all trying to do.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Michael. I think that's really some good advice about what to be talking to the delegation about. Not only the programs, but also just sharing those stories that people have across the state about what's going on with nutrition and feeding. Any other ideas for advocates or anything else that advocates can be doing on this call? Leanne or Karena, anything else to share?
Yeah, so one thing, or I'll let Leanne go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that our non-English speaking population sometimes is overlooked. So if someone who, if you interact with that population regularly, if you could encourage them about PEBT and talking to their school administrators about applying for free or reduced meals if they're not already receiving them, and that PEBT is not considered in public charge. So I've had people call that have asked us to remove the benefit because they're afraid that it will affect their immigration status or citizenship, so definitely to pass it along that is not considered public charge and should not, dissuade them from taking advantage of the benefit that their child deserves to have.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. And I know that the cabinet offers some definitely Spanish translation for some of your materials, and your call line as well, I believe, has a Spanish option. Is that correct?
Yes, and our workers can get a hold of any language. It may take a little bit longer, but we have Spanish translators on staff, and then we can get any other translator and return a call to someone. So
yeah, thank you for reminding everyone about that, because that is really important that this is a program that's everybody can access, because it's just about feeding kids. That's all that you guys are concerned with. So
yeah, we just want to feed kids.
Into account this one.
One thing to add on that is the WIC program does not look at citizenship status. It's one of the few public benefit programs that don't. Anyone is eligible for WIC as long as you have a child under the age of 5 and you're identified as eligible. And I know the cabinet's been working on creating some Spanish materials and materials in other languages to increase WIC enrollment. But I think that's a great other opportunity if you have kids and you've really benefited from PBT, looking into those SNAP and those WIC programs. I think a lot of PBT families would really, really benefit from those benefits.
Hey, Alicia, one more thing I will add, and this is probably a little bit more of a farm bill comment than it is a child nutrition reauthorization comment, but in some cases it applies to both. Secretary Vilsack of the USDA is very much interested in understanding the systemic biases that exist in federal policy that limit access to food for folks who are hungry. So an example of a waiver that we're doing right now on commodity distribution is that we no longer have to fill out a log. It's basically a checklist. If we can get that codified as part of the permanent guidelines, that will reduce barriers for folks who may be undocumented or other barriers where folks are afraid to seek a benefit. So I think the more we talk about looking at our policies, looking at our programs, looking at legislation, and identify opportunities where there may be systemic bias in programs that can be eliminated to broaden the reach. I think right now those comments will be pretty well received, at least administratively from the USDA. So I would encourage folks not to be shy about those tenets of these programs and policies, because we've got an opportunity right now to address some of the biases that are built within them that limit our ability to get food to people.
Thank you for bringing that up. I think that's a really great point, and it's important for our advocates on the call today to hear that there is somebody listening at the USDA that's interested in making changes like that. So very exciting news from that administration. Karena, did you have something else to add? I wanted to make sure we didn't cut you off there.
Yeah, one thing I will add is that Feeding Kentucky, we are currently going around the state with Commissioner Quarles and doing what we're calling hunger listening tours and just talking to communities about what resources are needed in your community, how has food insecurity changed in light of COVID-19, and what policies, resources, infrastructure, funding is needed to create hunger-free communities. And we have one tomorrow in Glasgow at 10 a.m. at the Barron County Cooperative Extension Office, and we'll have another one on the 21st at 3 p.m. at the Davis County Cooperative Extension Office. And I think it's a really great opportunity to talk to elected officials and talk to Quarles about what's needed in your community and ways that we can build and move on from COVID-19 and hopefully come out better than we started. Because we know after the 2008 recession, it took us 10 years to restore food insecurity levels. We would ideally like it to not take 10 years to get to pre-pandemic food insecurity levels, and we ideally like to get that down quite a bit. So there's opportunities there, and we would love for you to join us.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. We'll make sure to send some more information about that in the follow-up as well. Sounds like lots of opportunities for our advocates on the call today, federal, state, and local, that they can get involved and talk about what's happening in their communities. So with that, I just want to say thank you to all three of you for joining us and for giving us so much great information about nutrition and what's going on across the state and the country. And I will pass it over to Mehek to close us out for today.
Thanks, Alicia, and congrats on finishing your first forum with us here. And I know there's many more to come. And then also thank you to all of our panelists for lending your insight on a critical topic impacting so many Kentucky families and their kids. As we heard today, there's several ways that you as advocates can act now to ensure we decrease childhood hunger and really simplify the nutrition programs that are available. One, it's reaching out to your congressional representatives to support the components of the CNR discussed today, as well as other federal legislation such as the Hunger-Free Summer Kids Act, which is co-sponsored by Senator McConnell. Also, when you're connecting with congressional leaders, I also encourage you to connect with your state rep and state senator as well. Share the stories that you've heard or seen in your community to ensure that they're aware of the current issues, but also share the supports that are available for families. And then lastly, I encourage you all to attend the Hunger Listening Tour with Commissioner Quarles as well that are happening. So I just want to take that second to say also thank you to Aetna Better Health of Kentucky for their support of today's Advocate Virtual Forum. And as a reminder, as we're looking ahead to upcoming forums, next week we will not have a forum, but the following week we will return back to our routine schedule. So that will be July 14th on a Wednesday at 10 a.m. as always. And wanted to also share one last nugget is that we will follow up with an email that includes the recording of today's forum along with resources discussed and a link to sign up for the July 14th forum. So thanks again for joining us, and we hope you have a great rest of the day. Thanks all. Bye.